In this tutorial, we will learn how to create an instructional video using Adobe Premiere Elements. Please make sure you've already watched most of the introductory tutorials available on Adobe TV and linked in Module 2 on our course website. The sample video that I will produce in this tutorial is about a mobile app that enables you to use your smartphone as a remote mouse for controlling your computer while teaching away from your workstation. The specific production skills that we're going to target in this tutorial include mastering the cutaway, doing a match cut, creating a zoom cut, title overlays, transitions, and of course audio crossfades. A good way to begin this type of tutorial is to take a look at the finished product first. So let me play back the video as it sits now in its produced state.
Okay, so here's the problem. If you're a teacher, delivering a live presentation requires you to be near the host computer so that you can press the keyboard or click the mouse to advance your slides. But this limits your mobility around the classroom. And although there are these cool remote USB clickers that you can use, these devices are cumbersome, they're expensive, and easy to forget if you're traveling. A much better option is to use your smartphone, which not only gives you the ability to tap the screen to control the slides, you also get a keyboard and a virtual mouse for complete control of your computer. So check out your smartphone's app store and search for Remote Clicker. There are a lot of choices, but my favorites are Jumi Presenter for iPhone and Android and PC Remote for Windows phones. Happy clicking.
Now I'm going to assume that most of you have already watched the tutorials on Adobe TV as you were asked to. If you have not done that yet, you're going to get lost in this tutorial. So please take the time to go back and review as many of those Adobe TV Premiere tutorials as you can, because that will give you the foundational knowledge on how to use the Premiere interface. I'm going to start off having skipped several steps here. For example, you can see that I've got 4 clips in my Projects Asset tab. I'm going to get that out of the way right now. I can bring it back down anytime I want, don't forget. And I've already dragged 2 of those clips down here. Now in truth, this is really that first clip that I cut into 2 pieces because I just let the camera roll. After all, it's a single camera production here, and I don't have a whole team working with me. So I just let it roll under the assumption that I'm going to go back later and cut out the stuff where I screwed up. And as you would imagine, I goofed up my lines several times. Even though I had a script right there in front of me, I stumbled probably 4 or 5 takes before I got this the way I thought it would be acceptable. But in the process of doing that, I found out that the first part was better than the second part in several of them, so I have then stitched them together. So I went out and I cut a large chunk out of the middle here, effectively creating 2 different pieces. And I want you to see right now the problem that this creates. It's called a jump cut. So I'm going to drag it and stick these guys right next to each other, and I'll put my playhead right back here. Just back up a couple seconds. I want you to watch how I jump. I'll skip here from one clip to the next, and it's very noticeable.
For complete control of your computer. So check out your...
Okay, did you see that? I basically teleported from one side to the next. Here I am right there, and then bam! I suddenly appear over there. There's also a slight change in lighting there. I'm not really sure. Maybe the cloud came by or something because the window was open. In any event, this is a problem. It's called a jump cut, and one of the most common ways that we fix this problem is to overlay another piece of video that we typically call a cutaway. In addition to covering that jump cut, I also want to cut away to a close-up of the keyboard when I back up here toward the beginning of the clip. Watch this. When I lean down with my left hand
near the host computer so that you can...
Right there. Somewhere right around there, I want to cut to a close-up shot of the keyboard. And so I shot a clip over the shoulder of the keyboard looking down, and I want to position that right here on top. The technique for doing this is no different than covering up this jump cut here. I'm going to put some tracks here in video, or some clips here in video track number 2. Here's how it's done. I'll start off, I'll go up to the Project Assets tab, and I'll get the clip that I want to put in there. Now, I've cheated. I've already double-clicked on this and trimmed it using the set in and set out points here so that only the content that I want displayed is actually going to show. The clip is actually much longer than that, but I only need a couple seconds of this for my cutaway. Typically, most cutaway shots are about 3 seconds. So I'm going to click and drag that down here now. Now when I position this clip, I'm going to smack it upside right next to this playhead here, because as you recall, I had the playhead aligned right where I wanted my arm to be fully extended and my fingers about to press the keyboard button. And if I take the playhead now, I can scrub through and see how well this matches. See, if I back up and play it again, the arm is extending and then bam, it touches down. This is called a good match cut. We'll watch it in real time now. I'll press play.
Computer so that you can press the key.
And you can see the timing is synchronized. And it's not on here very long, only 2.5 seconds, something like that. And then we finish that part of the segment. So that's a match cut. Let me show you another cool cut here called a zoom cut. Let me get my Project Assets tab retracted up there into the tab bar. And take a look here. I'm going to position my playhead right about the time I hold up these two pieces about shoulder height. When I do that, I'd have the playhead right here. I can come down and grab my scissor tab here and click it. And what that does, it cuts the clip in two. So now, instead of having a single clip there that I had selected, it's now two clips. What this enables me then to do is to take the playhead and I'm going to position it right about there, right when my hands start to drop down, and I'm going to mouse over the scissors again and click them again to make another cut. So now what we've done, if you see the area that I've highlighted right here, this is now an independent clip and it can be independently edited, and this allows us to do some pretty cool things like a zoom cut. Now even though Premiere Elements uses these scissors here, in more professional editors it's usually always a razor icon. I guess that's relevant for older film-based editing when we actually had to take a razor to cut it, and then you take tape, literally, and splice them together. Thankfully this is all nonlinear digital technologies and much faster these days. Anyway, so we have this independent clip here, and what I want to do, instead of having it widescreen here, I want to zoom in tight to just that portion. And this helps break up a little bit of the monotony of the talking head video style by having a close-up. So here's how that's done. The first step is to position the playhead right above the desired clip that you want to set up as a zoom cut. Make sure it's selected too. You'll see it change in a highlight color. And then come up here in the preview window and double click to activate the handles. Once you see the handles that surround the perimeter of this frame, it's very easy. You just grab one of the corners and keep dragging until you get to the desired zoom level. I'm going to go as tight as I can. And then I'll come back up here and click and drag to get the screen centered. Actually, you never really want it totally centered. You want it something like that. And now, as you see where my playhead is, this clip, the entire clip, stays at that zoom level. Prior to that, though, we have the wide shot. Now, don't worry about the difference in quality here. It's fuzzy because it hasn't been rendered, and video rendering is a term that we'll discuss a little bit later. But if I back up a little bit here, you'll see what I mean. We have this nice even flow to this cut now.
And although there are these cool remote USB clickers that you can use, these devices are cumbersome, they're expensive.
See how smooth that is? Because you're not trying to align up any cuts, any cut clips. You're just slicing the existing clip and then changing the zoom level of one. It's a very common technique, and it's called a zoom cut, and very useful to break up long stretches of talking head video. I'm going to do another match cut right now, and I want to set my playhead here right at the point where I just start to look down, right there. I'm going to release my playhead there because that indicates to the viewer that something's happening. Even though it's subtle, I'm just looking down. It's a great opportunity to overlay a cutaway shot to a tighter clip. In this case, I'll go back to my project assets, and I took a shot of a close-up of the actual phone in my hand. So I'm simply going to drag that down in here the same way we did before and line it up against the other clip. And as I play it back, you'll see we have a nice even match cut here. I'll back up a couple frames.
Which not only gives you the ability to tap the screen.
And not only is it match cut visually, but it also is matched on that audible tap on the phone. In fact, you can see down in here in the waveform, I had the microphone a little bit too close to me, and it was the gain on the mic was a little too loud, and that's why it distorts every now and then. And you could hear a pop there for a second when I said tap. And so I tried to make sure that my finger tapping was synchronized with this, and all I had to do with that, just like we did before, was just to trim this clip and position it appropriately right at these key moments in the timeline. I'm probably going to need to trim off a little bit of this here, just a little too much, because I want my hand to match as it exits. Well, I guess that's pretty good. You see how my fingers are still there on the phone, and then in this next clip, when we go back to the wide shot, my finger's in roughly the same position, so that's dialed in pretty well. We have one more match cut that we want to put in here, and that, as you recall, is to get rid of our jump cut. This seam right here between those two clips, remember I jumped. Watch this. And so we can't leave that there. We got to cover it up with something.
Of your computer. So check out your smart.
Did you see that jump? I went from the right just a little bit over to the jog just a little bit over to the left. So this is what I'm going to do. Right at that seam, I'm going to drag in another clip. The clip that I'm going to drag in here is a tight shot of the screen. But if I put it right there on the seam between those two clips, it still doesn't really look right. I'm looking down, and then I look up, and then I go to that. That doesn't make any sense, because it indicates that I'm not really controlling the screen anymore. A better place to put this cut is right when my eyes look down, right there. That's a good place to put a cutaway shot. So I'm going to jam this up next to that, and I think it's going to be a little too long, so I'm going to shorten it up here a little bit. Remember, my whole goal with this cutaway is to cover up this seam, the seam right there between those two clips, because that's where the jump cut is. So let's back up here a little bit and watch this whole segment here and see if that works pretty well.
Not only gives you the ability to tap the screen to control the slides, you also get a keyboard and a virtual mouse for complete control of your computer. So check out your smartphone's app store and search for Remote Clicker. There are a lot.
Okay, so that covers up that jump cut really, really nicely. It looks like I could trim back just a little bit more there, because when I start looking at the viewer again, I want to maximize that opportunity. I don't want to be hung up on this empty shot of the screen here. This is actually called a J-cut as well, which is an advanced term for an audio cut, but you'll learn about that later if you take the EDIT 640 videography class. So I don't want to give too much away. But anyway, so cutaways cover up jump cuts. That's the most important part of this particular strategy. Now let's move on to titling. Now I'm going to cheat just a little bit here and skip ahead some. I've already created my titling using the text tool, which is up here under this menu. And if you watch the other tutorials on Adobe TV, you already know how to do this, so I don't mind skipping ahead. But I did want to point out one thing. I'm going to go back in here, and as if I wanted to edit this title again, I'm going to double click it to bring open the text editor here. And I want to show you that there's a slight opacity, a slight transparency applied to this background rectangle. And whoops, I need to be in my cursor there. Let me undo that. I'm going to select this text frame, or not text frame, but the background shape. I went to my Shapes tab here, grabbed the rectangle tool, and drew a rectangle. You know how to do that. It's just like what we've been doing in 604 when we did all our shape exercises. Anyway, I'm going to right-click that, and I'm going to go to the Transform Wing Out menu, and there's an opacity option. I've set it to 95%. I can't really go much lower than that because I have text in the background here. You can even barely see slide 3 kind of blending through. So if I'm going to be consistent with the CRAP principle of contrast, I've got to make sure that my overlay shape here contrasts sufficiently with the background imagery. And in this case, because it's so prominent, if I want to reduce its dominance, I need to just use a little bit of opacity. And that's what I've done here. The other thing I'll point out is that I've set this up so that it enters right when I say my favorites are, and so there's some synchronicity involved there. Obviously you want it to be timed appropriately, and that's just simply a matter of dragging to the appropriate spot. And often it's easiest just to take the playhead, put the playhead exactly where you want it, and then take the clip and snug it up against that. All right, we do have an awkward area in the dialogue though. Once again, our famous jump cut. If you listen to it real carefully down here in this waveform, you'll hear me inhale and then inhale again, almost as if I'm trying to take 2 breaths there. And that's an artifact of having to cut those clips and splice them up make one clip into two clips, and it just isn't smooth. And one of the best ways to hide that is to do something called a crossfade. Crossfading is actually a transition effect. So I'm going to go down here to my transitions tab and up to the pull down menu here and change it to the audio transitions category. And there are only a couple of them here. I'll choose constant gain. For the most part, constant gain and constant power sound very, very similar. But I want to take this and drag it right on top of that seam. But at my current zoom level, it's kind of hard to be precise about where I position it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in several times and scroll over. Sorry if you've lost me here. Let's see if I can find it again. There we go. Put the cursor right there. And zoom in a couple more times. Now we're talking. Now you can see on the waveform where the new clip begins, or I guess the very last clip begins, and the preceding clip ends. So I want to cover up this space right here, because believe it or not, somewhere in there is an exhale. And if you're trying to cover up jump cuts, we've got the title on top of it. That's going to look good, but to have this actual crossfade on top of it is really going to help us. So here's how that's done. Again, transitions menu, constant gain, and I'm going to drag that right on top of that audio track. And it's got a default length, and you can see how that's too long because it's covering up some of the dialogue. But I'll allow it to go in there. I'll click done, and sometimes it'll rough shift like that, and the easiest thing to do is just to manually move it back over, and sometimes you actually have to come in here and trim it short. You can see how if I click and drag, it actually moves over a little bit, and then I can force it to sit right there. And now when I scrub over this, you really can't hear it unless you have headphones on, but I promise you this now hides that exhale. So if I were to back up some and play it from the beginning,
computer. So check out your smart.
So, and I took the titles off here just temporarily while I did this, but you can see how now we have this smooth audio transition here that helps cover up the seam between these two clips. And of course, our final step in this project is to export this. Now, this is a step that causes students to get confused a lot. Most of us are conditioned to think, when I want to save a file, I go to the File menu and I select Save. And I just did. I saved my file. But what kind of file did I save, really? Well, in Adobe Premiere Elements, I've saved a project. And a project is not playable anywhere except on the host computer where it was first created. So if I wanted to share this video online or submit it for homework, nobody's going to be able to view it except for me, because a project file really, believe it or not, is just a text file that references all of these multimedia assets, the clips, the sounds if you use sound, and as well as other objects that you've imported. The trick here in Adobe Premiere Elements is to go over to the right hand side and use the Publish and Share pull down menu and choose either computer or mobile phone. You're going to use mobile phone. That's our best setting here. They limit your options. There are many other options and other variables and parameters that can be tweaked here. But I want to show you a couple of them, and then we'll go back to this mobile phone setting. That's the one you want to use. But under computer, you have a pull down menu, or you can scroll through this. You can see some of the file types. MPEG is very old. Nobody uses that anymore. That was the default file format for making old DVDs, MPEG 1, then MPEG 2. AVC HD is a high definition quality file format. A lot of consumer level HD cams still use that, but you're not burning to tape most of the time, or burning back to AVC HD. Most of you would be publishing this so that it's ready to be consumed by your students on the web. AVI is a good file format. It's lossless. It's a good file format when you know that you're going to send this project to another video editor for post-production, especially if it's special effects and graphics. A lot of times they'll export as an AVI and then send that to a graphics specialist for some post-production. Windows Media, you know what that is. That's the Microsoft proprietary file format. Not recommended unless you know all of your students are on a Microsoft computer. Same goes for QuickTime. That was Apple's proprietary. And let me back up here, and we'll go now back into mobile phones. And this may seem unintuitive to you, but we're going to choose Apple, iPod, iPad, and iPhone, that preset. And if I click this pull down menu here, you can see I have a whole bunch down here. The higher quality ones are down at the bottom, but I think Apple iPhone, Apple iPod, widescreen, high quality. If you know you shot at 16:9 aspect ratio, which if you shot with your phone, you did shoot at that aspect ratio. I'm going to choose that, and high quality is pretty decent. Give it a title, and then make sure you know where you're saving it. Click on the Browse button. You know all this by now. But I want to point out here that H.264 is the file type. It's not exactly true. H.264 is the codec that's used. It's the compression decompression algorithm that is standardized, and that's the key word here. We want to use a standardized codec so that it can be played back on any device, including Android mobile devices, Apple devices, Windows-based computers, Mac-based computers, Unix machines. They can all play an H.264 file because it will be wrapped up in the MP4 container. So in Premiere Elements, they stuff MP4 here in the Apple iPod preset. Even though it's really not an Apple technology per se, it is a standardized technology for all multimedia devices. Nevertheless, as long as you see H.264 down here in the file type, you're going to be just fine. Make sure you know your aspect ratio. If it's 16:9, it'll be set to widescreen. High quality is okay, but if you produce a file that's too big, if it's 100 megs, that's probably too big, so you might go back here and set it to medium quality and see how big your file is. Anyway, then you click Save, and then you are in business. So this concludes the tutorial for Adobe Premiere Elements 11. I can't wait to see your homework files, so good luck and have fun.